for coming. We're going to introduce the next session, streamlining product data into Plex. So what we're going to be doing here is having a discussion about a real-life experience of a customer that's going to be speaking, Aaron Ashman, who's with Creative Foam. You also will find several other people that are here at the event that are from the account also. And myself, Ty Myers, I'm with Actify, which we're a vendor that works with Plex from the front end side, helping to take different types of information and feeding it into or out of Plex.
So, like Ty said, my name's Aaron Ashman. I work for Creative Foam. I'm a senior product designer. A little bit about Creative Foam. I work mainly in the automotive foam division, but we're diversified. We make industrial, agricultural, medical products, lots of different things. But I work mostly in automotive, being here in Detroit. We're what I would call an 11th hour supplier. We get called in most of the time when products are rolling down the assembly line and they find a problem, and it needs to be fixed like right now. So we have really, really short lead times. We don't have a lot of really long cycle development processes. So we end up generating a huge amount of data. And a lot of that data, I would say probably 30 to 40% of what I do actually makes it to production. The bulk of what I do just kind of gets scrapped somewhere along the line. And so what we found out was we keep missing out on that information. I'm not sure what these slides are showing. Here, Ty, I'll let you do the slides. It's the presentation there. So what we ran into, we found out that we're missing out on a lot of this product data that we develop, but then if it doesn't go to production, we just kind of lose it. We're storing it in file systems and folders on hard drives and coming back to try and find it years later, months later. Different project engineers come back, try to find something else that somebody else worked on. It was just very difficult. We've been using Plex as an ERP system for a long time, and we wanted to have a way to manage our CAD data, and not just our CAD data, but engineering data, spreadsheets, documents, Word documents, specifications, APQP, DVP&Rs, all that stuff. And we wanted a way that we could have that CAD data interact with Plex into our forecasting and sales stuff and all of the stuff that Plex does. I'm not a Plex person. I'm a CAD person, so you have to forgive me with the Plex jargon. So most of what I do is from this line that way. And this here is where kind of Plex would come in. And so if it never makes it to this point, everything I've done just basically goes away. So we wanted to figure out a way that we could capture all that information and save it. And I can't tell you how many times someone's come back 6 months later and said, remember that thing we were working on? We're going to go ahead and kick that off now. Can we get parts next week? It's really difficult. So go ahead to the next slide. Sure. Another issue we ran into was we've got product designers, we have tool designers, we have our own in-house tool people. Because we operate on such a short development cycle, everyone does things a little bit differently. Because it's so fast, we all do things our own way, and we have to, because that's just the necessity. Everyone names things a little bit different. I work with mostly Ford, so I use Ford part numbers. Another guy works with mostly GM and Chrysler. They use different part numbering system. We have the European, the Japanese OEMs. They all use a different structure. We have to use it. And so we have no structured in-house naming numbering convention. We also have different forms and different specs and notices and things like that each of our customer uses. No two of our customers are the same. They don't use the same stuff. So some of this stuff's in PDF forms, some of it's spreadsheets, some of it's whatever, it's online, it's electronic. We need something that can basically handle everything. Go ahead. What we found out was that we're spending an awful lot of time trying to figure out what it is we're actually doing, because we spend a lot of time trying to figure out, okay, what's the status of this thing? We've got really short lead times and stuff. What are you working on? What's coming up next? Spending a lot of time and resources and really expensive people's time figuring out if we can manage this workload. And all of our information was kind of spread out all over. And they got to kind of get it all centralized, and we'd spend a lot of time trying to do that. Go ahead. And then after we'd get all that information together, we'd present it to all the managers, and then they would, decide how to divvy up resources so that we could actually make the products on time. So we had basically a spreadsheet, and we'll show that a little bit later. We called it a job sheet. But once something would become, it was going to be produced, we would have a work or an order for the product, then it would get into a job sheet. And these reports would be electronically copied and shared. And it's just a spreadsheet. It's just an Excel spreadsheet, and everyone would have access to it. It wasn't a really great tool. Sorry, Dave. So we talked to, what was the name of the company?
SimData.
SimData. They came in and they did an analysis for us. They said, okay, what are you guys trying to do? What do you want to do? And they said, hey, we think you'd benefit from talking to these people over here at Actify. And we looked at, a little bit about my background. I've done Unix administration. I've been in CAD for almost 20 years. I've worked with several PLM systems, product lifecycle management, Team Center, Smart Team, Windchill. I've worked with ERP systems, IFS, SAP, OpenEDM, a few. So I've got a pretty good background in this stuff, and I've actually went through a couple of times before bringing companies up to speed that didn't have these systems, and I know it's really a fairly complicated and sometimes painful process, but it's absolutely necessary, especially if you're generating CAD or electronic or math data. We looked at Team Center. Like I said, I work with Ford primarily. Ford uses Team Center. It would be a really good move for us because we just use the same thing that our biggest customer uses. It would be great for me because I'm an expert at Team Center. I would be zero transition for me. It would be a nightmare for everybody else in my company. It's a really big, unwieldy program. The training would be very difficult for anybody that's not very CAD-centric. It does a lot of stuff that our company has absolutely no desire to do. It's really expensive, and it's a nightmare to implement. So it wouldn't be a really good fit for our company. On the flip side of that, there were a couple other things out there that were CAD-focused, but we use several different CAD platforms, and we can't use something that's just going to work with CATIA or something that's just going to work with NX. We also have NC CutterPath programs that use other languages. We needed to handle everything. So we talked to Actify, and we're already using Spinfire, one of their products, which allows us to view and take mass properties and measurements and cut sections on math data, so that people who need that information don't have to. I try to be as politically correct as possible, bother me to do that stuff. I generate this stuff, and it's really annoying when I'm knee-deep into some really complicated design and somebody comes and says, hey, can you give me a mass calculation on this, tell me how many cubic centimeters of foam are in this part, and it really slows me down. So we contracted with Actify to come in and build a solution that's going to manage our math data, all of our engineering information in one central repository that's accessible by everybody in the company, depending on their role, and also interwork Plex in there and gather that information all in one spot that's easily accessible. Anything else that you?
No, that's
no?
Good.
All right. Well, I'll turn it over to Ty, but I will be here for questions and comments. So.
Yeah, and if you do have questions, they're going to bring mics around, so just, when you're ready, just let us know. And we'll try to save some time at the end here. Thank you, Aaron. Creative Foam has been a great customer, not only for Actify, but for Plex also. And they've had a lot of great success with Plex. But as Aaron was saying, they had a bottleneck in the early phases, in the pre-production type phases, so before part numbers were ever created. So a lot of disparate information, whether it's content or disparate files, or it's dealing with multiple native CAD files. You know, if you're a discrete manufacturer, your product definition is key, and that's usually going to be in CATIA, SolidWorks, Pro-E, NX, and that's something that we deal with on a daily basis, regular basis. And the ability to take those files with one system for a fraction of the cost, if you know CATIA, it's not the most inexpensive tool to use. But the challenges that we're encountering, or we see our customers encounter both for Plex and for Actify, and as with Creative Foam, they need to gather product data, the definition up front. They need to track initial development activities. When they win the order, they don't want to look back and say, where were the files that helped us win that business over this past year? Communicating engineering data, not only internal to the organization, which is key. You want to cross all those department silos and make sure everything's communicated downstream, but to get your suppliers involved. Allow them to log in and only see their kind of information and make sure that it's secure. Visibility and access to enterprise data, it's not just about the product itself from the design standpoint, but there's a lot of other information that's being created, whether it's sitting in Plex as financial information, or it's materials information, or maybe you're even using a PDM or PLM system. That sometimes those tools are just at a point where only a few people get access. You need to be able to share that and allow that data to get pushed up into Plex. Plus have self-service capabilities of handling this information, so you don't have to constantly go back to IT or to other staff to get the information, and keeping that data all in sync. So we've got a unique way of tying all types of disparate information together. The alternatives, as we were kind of describing, well, when I talk about alternatives from the Actify standpoint, what do we do? He mentioned product visualizations, viewing the native CAD files, view, measure, markup, extract out the engineering BOM, the PMI information that are hidden inside the model, or maybe it's dimension information. It's also taking that native CAD file and maybe downstream I need a step file, a JT file, stereolithography file. Well, as we could go over and bother engineering to get that information, or you could give everybody the access to the right tools. Then there's control of the content in the file. So you need a tool that can give you check-in, check-out, version control, your history, your audit trails, BOM management, project management, and so forth. So there's a variety of tools that we bring as a toolbox, or you could go look at alternative systems that do pieces of it. Like a PLM system, many people will find those to be pretty complex. And I'm sure many of you have looked for those type of tools. Or you have to adapt to the way the tool works versus the way you operate as a business. Or they can be too expensive, but you know, you can read all this, but one of the biggest keys I feel is down in this area, user adoption. I can't tell you how many companies we've gone into to find out where they've invested heavily into an enterprise technology, and they find out that a small percentage of those seats are ever being used. They do see a lot of spreadsheets in their company. What's happening is people just won't adopt the technology no matter how you try to force them. They have to embrace it. So between us and Plex, what we're able to do is give a very friendly, easy access method to all types of data from other systems, even legacy systems, and bringing that information together. So to streamline product data into Plex, one of the things that we use working with Creative Foam, and their example was we tied in with the web services, so we were able to do bidirectional feeds of information. We can pump critical information such as I want to take the engineering BOM straight from the CAD file and pipe it up so you have the E-BOM. Or I want to strip out the GD&T data and automatically create the spec sheets in Plex. Or if I'm in Plex and I see a part number, but I don't know what that part number stands for, it could be very cryptic, to be able to click on the part number and bring up a visual model of that part. Those are the kind of things that we can do for you. So product visualization, view the part, basically a complete art-to-part integration of the system. If you bring up the E-BOM, maybe you want to start producing your manufacturing BOM before you push that up into Plex. So with the integration that we did with them, we tied to the CAD systems. We had an automated publishing engine that publishes all the information at your repository level. So it starts taking all the data, creating the thumbnail images, stripping out the data, and it will pop certain information into Plex or where you need it, or into our visual catalog. But in this case, it also was pumping it into what we call a job sheet for Creative Foam, something they specifically requested. So overview, visualization, our data discovery tools bring all this kind of information together. It allows us to do visual analysis and reporting. It runs on a drag and drop interface, so you can see here one of the icons being Plex. This system here allows you to map out your process instead of changing to the application. So I would drag any of those icons over to the right, and what would happen is when let's say I drop a CAD file into a folder, these actions will occur, whether it is an email notification to somebody, it's stripping out the JT file or a step file, it's making the viewable file, it's taking the BOM, pushing it to Plex, and so forth. It's a very user-friendly, self-service type tool to get what you want. And once you have this set up, usually at an admin level, then you just run it for those jobs. If you have another client and you want a different process to occur, you set up another. These are what we call pipelines. You feed some information in, and it's going to automate all the rest of the processes and feed the data to where you need it. Now, as I was talking about the job sheet for Creative Foam, this sheet that you see here was intended to be a one-page, give me all the information I need coming from any of my sources. As we said earlier, their big bottleneck was having their top managers spending hours consolidating data every week into a spreadsheet, then meeting for 4 hours the next week to bring that data together into another spreadsheet that's static, making copies of the file and sharing it with everybody. Here, it's a dynamic web page that first you can see the visual model, which we've added to it, so they could click on it, rotate it. And if you want to see in this, by the way, we have their scenario actually running out in the hallway. You can click on the top icon there, and you can see what files or resources are associated to this job sheet. Take you to the catalog for more information if you'd like. You can get the job number, customer number, project team. They can log in and change that information. It will control the history of it. See the Plex information from the part number and linking to the ERP system so that as we do more information like the financials down below, once they enter that up above, it starts populating the fields. Supplier information, project milestones, documented project issues that they have, project status readiness, documented project costs, and of course, some business rules, traffic lights. I want a quick way to know where my business is. What's the status of it? So this is not just a tool of Actify. This is a complement of Plex and Actify working together and sharing information. Now, from the Resource Center, I commented about some other tools. We have out-of-box solutions that help with that spreadsheet. For example, here is, I'm looking at one of my product assemblies, and at each component, you can see the product structure over here. At each component, I can see different information, such as I can upload any type of file to that project. It could be a Word file, it could be a quote, it could be a PDF, a PowerPoint, the CAD file, a thumbnail image. It has check-in, check-out control of the file. So here's your data management. Next to it is data docs, which is like a dynamic spreadsheet. So instead of using spreadsheets and having them be static, you get a dynamic information tied to your product structure. You've got the CAD properties that are already stripped out, like the bounding box, dimensions, weight information is already accessible. You don't have to go and look for that information. It's just readily available. You can see some little dashboards at the top that can be implemented. So it gives you, again, the kind of the full view. You click on the image, and it brings you up into a web-based viewer. So key takeaways here is migrating the front-end information, which I refer to as the engineering data or the product definition, into the Plex system. Benefits, you get greater control, visibility, but I could say for the client that it's the efficiencies that they're getting in their operation now, the communication of the data across the different departments, and it's helping bring Plex to the front end of the system versus in the production side. Is there any questions?
Got one over there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you talked about uploading, I think you talked about uploading attachments, is that correct?
The CAD model, or it can be, we do 3D and 2D, so it could be the CAD model or it could be a 2D drawing.
Is that information stored in Plex or is it stored with Actify?
What we do is when we're flexible in how we implement, but in most cases what we're doing is we're going to have associated to the part number up in Plex, the viewable thumbnail image. And then if you click on the part number, it would be a link to the model information or to the drawing information. Did that answer your question? Okay. Yeah, if you don't mind. This is Jennifer Martin. She's the IT manager for Creative Foam. And next to her is David Dyke. He's the director of advanced engineering.
My boss.
And Aaron's boss, yes. A lot of our clients are multi-site, multi-CAD environment clients. And in their case, they have 14 locations? 12 locations. So, you know, when you have that kind of environment and you have your native CAD files can become pretty large. So you almost need a system that can keep that native CAD file where it's at versus trying to transport it to every location across the bandwidth that is limited. So we extract all the important information that you need and still have a viewable file that you can investigate, and that's shareable, but you still keep the native CAD file secure in one location.
So with the application interfaces that we were seeing on those slides, I'm assuming that none of those are custom .NET applications that are written specifically for Creative Foam. That those are all that was native Actify interfaces. And so I guess what I'm wondering then is, in addition to that, what other development, customized development, did Creative Foam have to do in order to get the web service portion of this functioning properly?
First off, the job sheet that we showed you, that is a dashboard. It was not out of the box. The catalog that you see that does the data management, project management, and so forth, and the viewing capabilities, those are out of the box. So the processing, the files. When we walked into create, and I don't want to speak too much for you, but yeah, you're always good about that. They had a specific way that they operated. So the spreadsheet, the way you saw it, looks almost identical to the way they're used to operating. We wanted to give them a tool that they didn't have to change the way everybody was up to speed on how it looks. The only thing we really added was the access to the additional files and the viewable model. And sure.
The data that we're pulling out of Plex into the job sheet is tool order information as far as the invoice number, the price, and some customer EDI data. So we're using web services for that only.
So the product specification data is not being pulled from Actify, like the dimensional information.
Not in their
isn't being
case,
pulled
it is
in.
not.
Okay.
But we've done that before in prior projects with Plex.
Thank you.
Here you go.
Do you work with Mentor Graphics?
No. Mentor Graphics is an ECAD application, and the viewable capabilities of a Mentor Graphics file is very tailored. So they have they give away their, I should say their free, is it a free type reader? But they have their own specialized reader.
Right.
So we had looked at it, we talked with them, but it was not something that we chose to do.
Okay. So you don't play in the automotive realm?
Oh, we're very
Much.
heavily actually in the automotive realm, yeah.
Just not our area.
Not dealing with the
Electronics, right? Mentor Graphics, more electronics? Wiring.
Wiring,
Electronics, right?
yeah, the metadata, yes. The visual, no. Does that make sense? Because
So
we
you
can
could-
strip
you-
data from the database of it, but we don't do the visual model because it's a very
Okay, but you
specialized
could
format.
pull bombs. You could create
Yes.
the bombs. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a step.
But because we're pulling it from their database versus from the model.
Well, you mentioned everything except for Mentor.
Yeah, basically any of the mechanical CADs, leading mechanical CAD applications, Autodesk, Inventor, ProE, SolidWorks, Solid Edge, Ideas, yes.
All the big boys.
Can you explain a little bit more about how you're doing the tactical push of data into Plex? 'Cause it sounded like it was a combination of web services and some other techniques.
We're not pushing anything into Plex, it's just a pull. It's just a pull of customer EDI data and some tooling invoice data.
All right, so Ty introduced me earlier. I'm Dave Dyke. I'm Director of Engineering at Creative Foam. And I'm sorry, because I'm not a big computer guy, not a Plex guy, but how many of you guys are tier ones in here, tier two automotive suppliers? Okay, so here's my headache, right? So I worked with these guys in the past, and everybody's having us run multiple different software platforms, and you got to buy a bunch of $25,000 licenses to read them. So I got introduced to Spinfire because, as Aaron said earlier, the first thing I noticed when I came to the company is everybody's bugging the CAD department. They want to know, how big is this hole? How long is this part? So the first thing we did is we rolled Spinfire out for everybody and said, okay, that's good. Then the light bulb went off in my head. These guys have products that store data in the form of Centro, that report out in the form of the Insight dashboard. The problem was, even as I talked to a lot of integrators, we couldn't afford Team Center. We couldn't afford Innovia. And I don't know any of you, and I can guarantee you most of you can't afford it either, unless your name is Ford or Chrysler or GM or Nissan or Honda. It'll virtually build an entire vehicle, and none of us need to do that. All we need to do is manage our data, manage our parts, manage our costs, manage our quality, right? So sat down with these guys and said, this is what we need to try to do. So essentially what we built was something for everybody to use. Problem number one, if you are all tiered suppliers, I'll guarantee I'll call you a liar if you tell me it didn't happen. Every one of us has built at least one mold per year to the wrong engineering level data. And it's happened to every one of us. And sometimes multiple times in the same year. Because we do a really poor job, nobody supports us with a way to properly share proper data. So that's how we built this, right? So if I step back and give you a macro view, we're trying to manage program management data. Deliverables, dates, timelines. From there, we got to tie it to CAD systems. Microsoft Office does not talk to CATIA or NX. So we had to tie those together to say, okay, let's organize it. And then from there, we develop a lot of stuff. You all do, right? Our customers all want services. They want free CAD work. They want us to be able to support them. They want us to prototype for them. And then they'll tell us 6 months from now if we're going to get the business. So once we did, how did we know, right? We're reviewing these things every week. So we decided to build a pipeline to Plex, because once a PO shows up, our sales department and our sales coordinators then assign a Plex number, and they couldn't put in the customer PO and the tooling dollars that are approved and the variable costs that are approved. And we tied a link and a pipeline between Plex and this to show up for the program managers and for everybody in the company. So now, if you're in manufacturing, you can log into the system and you can see the CAD file he wants you to see. Not 47 study files, not things that are 2 engineering changes ahead of or 3 behind, but the one that he wants us to know is the A/B release level data. And your manufacturing engineers can click on it and open it on their laptop with Spinfire and manipulate it all day long. They can measure, they can pull PMI data, they can do everything they want with it. They can't draw lines, but they have the proper data. At the same time, they have their next 4 customer releases through EDI. They have their PO number from their customer. They have their tooling dollars that are approved. We have variable costs that are approved. Because what we would do every week is I would sit down with my entire engineering team and go through 65 programs and say, okay, Mike's sick today. Please pull up Mike's CAD file. I can't pull up Mike's CAD file. Why not? Because Mike stores his data different than me and I can't find it. And if I do find it, I'm not sure it's the right one. Problem number 1. Problem number 2 is, if you work with Mike and you can't find Mike's CAD file, how in the hell is the manufacturing group supposed to find it and build a mold to it? So we need to fix that. This addressed it. Secondary was, when are the deliverables and the dates, and are we late? Is it accurate? Do we know? Are you lying to me? Am I going to come back and find out next week that you actually didn't get it done? So we started to automate dates. Third one was, who knows that they're tied to this team and who's responsible for it? So with this system, we put in the teammates, and every teammate that we put in, which is an editable field, is also a search field. So our quality engineer, who is assigned to a specific plant, can log his name in the morning, and every job sheet with his name on it shows up on a Gantt chart. And it shows him when his deliverables are due on a Gantt chart from here until 3 years from now. And it will show when he's taxed in resources. And I, as a manager, can come back in and say, okay, I want to see all of my automotive programs, and I can see all those laid out so I can understand now where my resource problems are. But I'm responsible for all the engineering, so I can step back and look at automotive or composites or medical or consumer or all of them company-wide. Our plant manager can log in and just say, I want to see everything that's got my plant's name on it, and he can see all of his programs and when they're going to launch and the associated CAD data and what level he's at. And because of the Plex pipeline, does he have a PO? What's the PO number? What's the tooling? What's the variable revenue? And all that information is together in one simple little job spreadsheet that's fully editable. So that's really what the system does, right? Plex doesn't store CAD data. It can't. None of us can afford Team Center or Innovia. We just can't. So what this did was this built a bridge for all of us who need to figure out a way to manage our data, share our data, get data in the hands of people, which makes them powerful, without having to make 47 phone calls to find out what's the PSW date on job number 463 and why did it change. And the beautiful thing is that we don't have to manually go in and do it, because every 4 hours it goes into Plex, it pulls all the financial data, brings it back in, and populates and updates every one of those job sheets every 4 hours. So that's essentially what this thing has its opportunity to do. That's why it's powerful for us. We run a lot of programs, and that's why it can be a very simple, powerful thing for you guys. It gives us what we want on a PLM, gives us integration into Plex, and it was a very simple thing for us to roll out to manage all of our data. So does that help clarify a little bit of what was there? Do you have an example of the Excel sheet where they can actually see it?
They do at their booth.
Yeah, at the booth. At the booth.
So these guys have a booth outside, so we've got the job sheets running out there, and I can hang out for a little while. I know Aaron's going to be sitting there, so if you want a real clear picture of how it works, then you can stop by Actify's booth. It's a nice view. It's right down by the river on the end there.
Thank you, Dave. Is there any other questions? Yeah, in their case, they haven't, but we have done that type of push. I mean, basically, the more we're going to be working with Plex, the more we're going to be able to extend that.
Right, so everyone
Oh,
can
I'm
hear.
sorry. What Jennifer was mentioning is asking me if I wanted to talk about how we can push information. She had commented that they were pulling information, but it's not that they wouldn't want to push information, they just haven't at this point. And in the past, we've done other work with Plex where we were pushing information up, as I referred to, the EBON, the GD&T, and that kind of information. With the changes that Plex is making, we expect to keep doing more of a tighter integration. Sue, is there anything you'd like? Any other questions? Yes, in the back. We okay on time?
I think so.
This might be more for Aaron, but I'm wondering if you're using the ECR module in Plex, and if you are, do you have any integration or interface with this Actify solution for that?
I said it earlier, and I'll say it again. I'm not a Plex person, so I can't answer that question. I don't even know what you said. But
Jennifer, is there anything
change
from...
request.
Jennifer could speak to that.
Jennifer might be able to tell you about that.
So we do use the ECR module in Plex, but that is more for revisions that are coming from our customers at the plant level. So we don't use it in the pre-production area.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else?
Just a quick one. So are you using this in place of the PLM in Plex? Are you using PLM module in Plex at all, or this takes the place of that?
I don't, did everybody hear what she said? Could you repeat that? Couldn't hear you in the back.
We are not using the PLM.
Okay.
In the past, they were using, okay to say, in the past they had Smart Team as a PLM application, but since that was becoming end of life, they were looking to find a better way of doing things, and it wasn't answering all their problems that they were having at the time. So that's when they went off to the evaluation, talked with an analyst, and came back and started working with us.
Well, Smart Team would only house the data,
Right.
Yeah. Everything else goes on your network. So it still doesn't solve the problem. It was a Dassault solution for Dassault software.
Any other questions? Well, thank you for your time. We look forward to seeing you outside.